Hello, welcome to the video. I have something not super positive to talk about today. Netflix has made the decision to add advertising, to add commercials to the service. For the moment, that means that over the next year or two, specifically, they are planning to add an additional subscription tier at a lower price that will just include ads from the get-go. As plenty of outlets and such have pointed out, this is already the case on Hulu, it's the case on Peacock, it's the case on Paramount Plus. HBO Max has an advertising option, and then the more expensive ad-free option. Disney Plus is apparently also going to add a commercial tier that's supposed to be less expensive. And Netflix, it seems, hasn't been doing very well. They were apparently hemorrhaging just massive numbers of subscribers, or maybe not massive, but a concerning amount of subscribers. Apparently that was related to a price hike of the subscription rates. Now they're like, yeah, okay, we're gonna do this ad thing. We've seen a million other streaming services do it already successfully. Well, successfully according to certain definitions. And in one of the funniest things, oh my goodness, and this is reported in like on every site that's been covering this. Okay, hold on, let me find even though he has been against the incorporation of advertising in the past, he acknowledged that this would be a necessary step for the streaming platform. He also said that this would be a positive for Netflix subscribers, as it will give them consumer choice and the ability to choose a cheaper subscription, albeit one with advertisements. That is funny. That is just hilarious. Oh my goodness. Is there anyone on the planet who can't see through that spin? Like, that is so weak. Also, quick tip to literally any company who seems to be struggling with PR and, communicating to customers and stuff. Please just stop using the word consumer. We're done with that now. I don't know if you've heard the news, but it's like borderline disrespectful to identify your customer base as specifically using the term consumer, because you are inherently identifying a massive group of people solely by their ability to consume. The customer, at the very least, is a little bit more respectful. So that's just a heads up. Other people have talked about this. I think The Atlantic covered it. James Stephanie Sterling talked about it at some point too. Please stop using the word consumer. People are starting to recognize that that's not super great. Okay, he's trying to tell us this is great for subscribers. Oh, you guys are gonna love this. There's ads. If you want to pay a little bit less, there will be ads. Isn't that awesome? The one slightly positive note about this change is that apparently, at least at the moment, Netflix is not planning to integrate data tracking and, basically customized advertising, targeted advertising as part of this new model, which is like, to call it a win is probably misleading, but at the very least, it's less terrible than it could have been. I am hugely against data tracking and targeted advertising, and the fact that people in general haven't quite grappled with the idea that your data is just being straight up taken. You should be getting paid when companies take your data and sell it to other parties. Everybody's just signing away the rights to their data. There's no substantial legislation to protect customer data here in the US. It's a huge mess. Can't go on about that for long right now. But okay, Netflix doesn't want to do data tracking. All right, there you go. As we already touched on, plenty of other streaming services are already doing this. And yeah, like on a very base surface level, like the surface level interpretation of that is there are potential positives just in the fact that, like, okay, you really want to access this site. Oh no, it's like $8 a month, $10 a month. Can't afford that. Something like HBO Max, more, $15, $16 a month. That's a lot of money. But hey, I really want to watch these shows. There's no way that I'm going to sign up for a television provider because I'm under the age of 45. So yeah, fine. But one of the most depressing things about this whole situation to me, not just of Netflix integrating advertising, but all of these other services doing it too, and many more will probably follow soon enough, is that there was an alternate reality. Like, there was a potential path. When streaming started getting big, there was the tiniest chance that video advertising, as we're familiar with right now, and as has been dominant in like television broadcasting for decades, it could have died off. Like, it really could have just gone by the wayside and advertisers would have had to try to find other ways to market their stuff, maybe focus more just on social media, and it didn't at all. And instead, we've seen just the recreation in new forms of the old ways, and that goes for the streaming services themselves. Like, it's been kind of a running joke for a while that the streaming services collectively have just been splintering off and recreating television, basically. So just in certain cases, it's probably more expensive to sign up for all the streaming services you actually want than to do the traditional television route. It's so sad to see that there was some kind of opportunity for like genuine disruption and newness here, innovation, though I hate that word at this point, and it just didn't happen. Like, we are so quickly hurtling towards television again, but just in this weird fractured format. I'm really not happy about that direction. It feels like just such a missed opportunity that we're left with more of the same. The other major depressing point here for me is that when a streaming service starts taking on advertisers and opens the doors and says, hey, we have X number of subscribers, here's how much you have to pay us to advertise to them. Before that happened, subscribers basically had 100% of the bargaining power, even though it was like a collective bargaining thing, and it was unlikely that a giant group of subscribers of a particular streaming service would ever band together in total unity and work for some kind of change that they want to see. At the very least, there was power there. If the subscriber numbers dropped by a significant amount, as we've just seen with Netflix recently, it does evoke change. It does lead to change within the streaming service. That could be positive or negative, whatever. But now, when you also have advertisers on board, they're going to take up a massive amount of power and influence in terms of a streaming service's decisions. So this is something you've probably heard of with relation to all kinds of public companies or even like video game companies. It gets talked about a lot, where you have the shareholders, and while the company does ultimately really care about the wider audience and what they like and what they're going to buy, because that's where most of the money comes from, companies also really need to worry a whole bunch about what the shareholders want and whether the shareholders are happy. And sometimes, depending on the outlook and the perspectives of those shareholders, a company might make some really terrible short-term decisions that only make shareholders happy, but ultimately harm the wider audience's view and opinion of that company and their products. And it's the same thing here. We're like, okay, all of a sudden, now advertisers get a say. The advertisers in the future here, the near future, might even have enough power to say, hey, we don't like this show that you're trying to greenlight. We don't want to advertise on this show. If a bunch of companies say they don't want to advertise on a particular show, it might just not get made at all, because as a value proposition for the streaming service, it doesn't matter if we have a bunch of subscribers watching that show. If we don't also get to make money from advertising on that show, why do it? This is what kills plenty of actual, television broadcast shows, is that the whole point is it needs to attract viewers, because then you can sell ad slots. And if not enough people are watching the show, those ad slots are worth next to nothing, so they are canceled. Get them out of here. Community is no longer a thing. So it's very upsetting, for sure, that advertisers are going to be throwing money at Netflix and these other streaming services. So they have a say, and in a lot of cases, I have a feeling that their influence is going to be much more powerful than any kind of like fractured response, negative response you might get from a subscriber base. So there's that. Another thing we have to do here is look to the future. This is not just forever. They are not saying, okay, here's a cheaper ad tier, and then the regular tier is this price, and that is it. Ad infinitum. No, this is always a temporary thing. Pricing in these scenarios is always temporary, and over time, all of these subscription rates are going to go up. It's just absolutely inevitable. They could cite inflation. They could just cite, wanting to please shareholders or something like that. They can just turn these dials, and all of a sudden, they're making a bunch more money because they increase the subscription rate by whatever small amount at a time. And if they do it by a small amount each time, then you're less likely to lose a bunch of subscribers, because someone just says, oh, it went from $7 to $8 a month. Well, I can still manage that. This is not enough to make me drop off. But then over a period of years, those prices can get raised by a whole bunch just by those little steps at a time, and all of a sudden you're paying a whole bunch of money for a whole bunch of different streaming services. If you want to step up to the ad thing, even if you want to drop down to the ad tier, who knows, you might end up paying $10 a month to watch Netflix with ads at some point over the next 5 years or so. It's setting a precedent. It's setting up a parameter that can be tweaked to the detriment of viewers and subscribers and to the benefit of the company itself and advertisers. And I'm really not happy about that, and I know it's going to happen basically across the board. And even worse is that this really turns out to be a massive lose-lose-lose for viewers, subscribers, etc., because if they just keep adding more ads or make the ads more long, unskippable, annoying, etc., the ad blocks get larger, advertisers are happier, Netflix or whatever service is happier because advertisers are paying them more for that access, for these new features, and meanwhile, they are also making that ad-free tier, the premium tier of their subscription service, even more appealing because the ads have just become so miserable to sit through. Like, it's just such an unpleasant experience to have to deal with all this stuff and these new longer commercial breaks, etc., that, all of a sudden you're adding, it's perceived that you're adding value to that premium tier. And we know that this happens because this is 100% what has happened with YouTube. I briefly talked about YouTube advertising in my Patreon launch video. I didn't want to get into a huge amount of detail, but briefly I'll try to run you through some of the key points here. One of the biggest things that YouTube has done is, of course, just like the power creep in this 10-ish years, we'll say, where originally you just get like lower third ads, basically no video ads, and then a little bit later, we're starting to get video ads on some videos, some types of channels, etc., but a lot of them are skippable after just a couple of seconds. Okay, people are slowly getting used to things getting worse. And then years later, just speaking for myself, oh my God. I know that a lot of the frequency of ad breaks and mid-rolls and stuff does come down to individual creators making the decision of how much to allow on each video and on their channel overall. But even then, a lot of those decisions are being made to add more because they're making less money as creators from the ad revenue, so they feel like they don't have a choice. If they're a professional, what choice is there? They need to make enough money to cover expenses, etc. All bad, and at this point, I absolutely hate being on YouTube and getting the ads. And I was even thinking of finally doing the premium subscription this month. I said, hey, I have some extra money. I feel like I'm going to have a good few months. I'll work this into the budget. It's like $12 a month to do the YouTube Premium. No, it is currently $16 a month for YouTube Premium. And then if you want to, organize, you get some friends together, you can do the family plan thing for hopefully less money per. It's only going to get worse. Like, YouTube is the poster child for introduce bad thing, slowly make bad thing worse, and then all of a sudden, over here, hey, you could get rid of all of this for the low price of X. And then over time, we're just going to keep increasing that price. But even then, even when we're talking about YouTube, at the very least, the ad tier, so to speak, is free. Like, you just make your account, it's free. Yeah, they're going to track your data. Yeah, they're going to do targeted advertising. But at the very least, you're paying $0 per month in subscriptions to access that content. There's a lot of content to access on YouTube. In that vein, I've sort of understood, when you have these other junky streaming services like, Tubi, and maybe Pluto does similar things where, like, you have a lot of stuff there. You're going to get tons of ads, but at the very least, it's completely free. You don't have to sign up for any kind of account. The ad-free tier is there, but you don't have to mess around with it at all. To access the stuff, you can just do it and sit through the ads and tear your eyes out when you see the same thing coming up for the 350th time. And now, this Netflix and these other services are setting this new, possibly even worse precedent of no. At one point, there aren't going to be any services that you can access for $0 down. Even when you have to put up with ads, you're also going to be paying that monthly amount. And I hate it. I hate the idea of living in that future. I hate the feeling of just being nickel and dimed as much as possible every step of the way by every possible streaming service. I'm sorry. I don't think it's good PR. Sure, it has positive financial results for the companies making these decisions, but there is hopefully going to be a breaking point. There's hopefully going to be a point where at least a large number of viewers just say, no, thank you. I don't want to pay you like $6-7 a month to watch a bunch of commercials interrupting my show. There's too much. The advertising is too gross and awful. In fact, one of these articles, or I think it's a quote from the Netflix man, gave us a really, what I think is a valuable term, but he says something along the lines of, people who are ad tolerant can sign up for the lowest tier with ads. And that's wonderful for me, because I now can say quite proudly, I am not an ad tolerant person. I can't do it anymore. I can't watch all the terrible ads. I can't watch a bunch of giant companies just struggling to sound like they care about people and they're, contributing to combating climate change and that they're all about people. And oh my God. It's just so gross, and I just can't do it anymore. And hopefully a lot of other people already feel that way. Hopefully other people will eventually kind of reach that state and just say, enough is enough. I'm sorry. I'm just not engaging with the streaming service at all to begin with, or I'm going to find other ways to access that content. And that's when things roll over into the piracy discussion, which is obviously a discussion that's way too big and complicated to have right now. But as plenty of other people have pointed out, there's that wonderful Gabe Newell quote of Valve where he talks about how piracy is ultimately a services issue. If a company is not doing a good job of providing a product or a service in an affordable and convenient way, that's when people start going out of their way to pirate that content, to straight up steal it, because the options offered to them just aren't acceptable. They don't meet the demands of the customer base, of the people who actually want to pay for the stuff. They will pay for the stuff if it's there, if it's readily available, if it's easy enough to access. But you know what? We might see a resurgence of piracy for all this stuff. We might see a resurgence of piracy of big TV shows, big streaming shows, etc., streaming movies. Obviously, it never completely went away, but it might happen. It might happen, and at least for the moment, there are tons of ways to pirate stuff without any real consequences. I'm not telling you to do that necessarily, but it is an option, and it will be very interesting to see what the effects of this are. As I said earlier, maybe a bunch of people will just quit their subscriptions. Maybe a bunch of people will start ignoring, certain streaming services entirely, and they slowly become irrelevant because of that loss of their subscriber base. Maybe people will pirate more stuff. For the moment, it just feels like we lost. It feels like we lost streaming in general. Like I said, that brighter future was possible, and it's just gone. Like it's just been completely snatched away. Maybe this sounds melodramatic, but like it's all part of a progression. This is not the worst thing that's ever happened, even if it worsens over time. No, it's not the end of the world, but this is still honestly kind of a big deal. Like media consumption in general, discussion around media, discourse, etc., accessibility to media, these are all pretty important things, especially for a culture like ours that values media so highly. Right now, it seems pretty bleak in terms of how streaming services are treating their customers. Have your discussion. Please be nice to other people who have different opinions. But for the moment, that's what I think about the whole deal. I do think it's a harbinger of things to come and not a positive one at all. But that's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.